Good evening, good morning, or good afternoon. Thank you for taking the time to listen to my talk. My name is Craig. I've been working with event sourcing for around 4 years now, with the first year, which was just trying to work out what the hell is going on and what I should do. My most extensive experience with event sourcing is with my job at Superscript, which is business insurance, where we have to sort of advance agree to policies that are happening next week or next month, and the system needs to take certain actions at different times for when you agree and when the policy starts, etc., etc. And so we had this workshop with the engineering team a couple of months back, which got turned into a blog post, and now this talk, which we're going to go through today. We've only got 15 minutes, so it would take about 15 years to fully understand the insurance domain. So I thought we might event source a simple blog, which is a little bit overkill, but it should be a fun exercise for exploring this sort of problem area. So I'm sure most of us are familiar with blogging software. If you're lucky enough to not recognize the interface here, it's the infamous WordPress, where if you wanted to do this, you would set a date and time for the post to be published and then click on the schedule button. Unfortunately, WordPress is not event sourced, so that simply goes into the database with a post status and the post date of when the post should go live. Then when that time comes around, WordPress sort of uses any request that comes into it as a chance to sort of run a query and update the post status to be published if the post date is in the past. So we want to achieve something similar, albeit a lot more sophisticated, using the advantages of event sourcing, which is what we are trying to do today. So quickly, you might think this is a sort of simple thing to do. We might come up with a sort of post-published event. We fire that. It contains the timestamp of when the post should be published, and then in the projector we simply listen to that event, and then update our sort of read model with the published at timestamp. This might work for some applications, and it's obviously the simpler solution, which is quite good. But as your application can grow, you might have other requirements. So for this blog in particular, I want to have a sort of simple status field, which is either going to be sort of draft, future, or published. When the post is available, I want to send an email to my subscribers, but not before it's published. Otherwise, it would just go to a 404 page. And then I want the blog post to be in my database, so that I can produce reports and see what upcoming posts are happening. So to achieve these three things, I've got 4 different approaches that we went through in a workshop. They start from the most simple to the most complex, and then one sort of thought experiment that we came up with, but didn't quite implement. Some of them sort of violate the event sourcing principles, so but they're just there to express a point. Okay, cool. Let's get into the first one. So a lot of ORMs these days have the concept of like a computed attribute. So we've got our sort of status, which is going to be draft, published, or future. And then we can introduce this sort of dynamic or computed attribute called current status, which is a combination of status and then the publish at, and it sort of computes that value. So very, very simple. It doesn't require any sort of cron jobs or queues or scheduling or anything like that. And we can use this sort of dynamic property in our application to determine if the post is published or not. So quite simple, but it doesn't hit two of our requirements for this blog. There's no hook for the application to sort of send the email out to the subscribers once the date is hit. I can't easily sort of get reports on upcoming posts. I would have to sort of duplicate this business logic in my query or my SQL, which isn't great either. So then we go on to the next strategy, which is probably the one that would make most of us throw up, especially at an event sourcing conference. But a simple cron script which executes this SQL statement every minute or so. It simply updates the status if it's set to be published in the future, and that publish date is in the past. So definitely not event sourcing to update the status without an event, but it is a possible approach that you could use, and it's starting to hit some of our requirements for this blog. The main downside of this is, I guess, if you were to replay events, we'd end up with a different state unless we were to remember to run the script. But obviously not ideal, and it's still not allowing us to send an email to my subscribers when the post is finally published. We keep exploring, and we go on to strategy 3. Scheduled commands or scheduled events. So as we were doing this workshop, we're trying to achieve like a simple system without a lot of extra infrastructure, and we thought that we could just if the post isn't going to go live until a certain date, let's just schedule that event to be raised at that certain event. So you might publish a controller, you might have a publish API endpoint, and then that just queues a job in Redis or something else, which will execute that command only when that time is reached, which will cause the post to go live. It's starting to hit some other requirements of the blog. We can maintain like a simple status field, which will be changed to published when the post published event fires, and the application has an event now that it can hook into to send an email to subscribers. But now we've sort of removed one of the requirements, because this is a scheduled job in Redis or something similar. It's not in my database anymore. But we want to see what posts are coming up in the future. So we went back to the drawing board because we obviously want to hit all 3 requirements. So we kept exploring and sort of did a I guess you could say a bit more of an event storming session, and we broke up this process into 2 different events. So when you're actually hitting that schedule button, you're actually doing 2 things. You're telling the system when you want the post to be published, and then when that time comes, that's when the post is published. So it's slightly changing the model somewhat, but allow this sort of verbose event structure gives us more hooks that the application can use to meet its requirements. So this is sort of how we implemented it in our aggregate. So you call the schedule command with the publish at with the timestamp, which calls the first event, the scheduled event, straight away. And then if that timestamp is in the past, you sort of raise that post published event straight away as well. Then you will also need, if the publish at is in the future, you then need to have like a cron script or something similar, which will go through all the posts that need to be published, and then get the aggregate and then raise the publish event to sort of get that working. And then those events will be raised at different times. So we were quite happy with the solution. It sort of hit the requirements that we have a simple status field that we can now use. The post published event, we can have a reactor which will send an email out, and then we can we can listen for both events in our projector in our read model to sort of produce reports on upcoming posts that we have. So we're quite happy with that, and so we sort of called it a day. But there was still one niggly thing on our mind, which was that this system requires or is dependent upon this projector running. And I guess the ideal goal is that you could throw away your read model and change it, and it wouldn't affect your write model. They're supposed to be separated. So this got us thinking a little bit further, and we came up with the concept of time as a command. We didn't quite get to implementing this just because we hadn't seen it out there just yet. But basically, we were thinking that if you could loop through all your post aggregates, and then you tell it that time has elapsed, and that's more of in a command context, and you pass it the current time, and then the aggregate would look at its current state, what it thinks the now is, and then fire relevant events based on that. It's, I would argue, like a little bit more testable in that way, and you're not relying on conscripts running and calling aggregate. You can test your aggregate. I guess all its logic there. And most importantly, it removes the dependency on a read model for your application. The downside is that if you had millions and millions of posts, you would need to go through them all and then tell them some time has elapsed. And depending on your application, well, probably in a lot of applications, the aggregate wouldn't do anything because it's already published and it doesn't need to do anything else. So that's quite a bit of wasted sort of compute time going on there. So so that was a sort of a thought experiment that we came up with. Might prototype it a bit later. And our system, back in the insurance world, we went with verbose events, sort of hit all the boxes for us, which was good, and quite happy with it. I would prefer to go simpler, but the business, as it does, has lots of different requirements, and it provides us more flexibility going forward. I would like to use the time approach, and I'm interested to see if anyone has got any other approaches. Please hit me up, and would love to hear about it. But that's it for my short talk. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll pass back to Alexei.